week in which the favorite for the Democratic presidential nomination was brought down by a newspaper article about his personal life. An article that left him condemning a system
that reduces the press of this nation to hunters and presidential candidates to being hunted.
It was a week that left the Democratic race wide open. We'll talk about that with two of the candidates, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Congressman Richard Gephardt of Missouri, and also with Democratic insider and former chairman Robert Strauss. But it was also a week that raised big questions for the media. Is a politician's personal life now fair game? We'll discuss that with New York Times columnist and former editor A.M. Rosenthal. All on Meet the Press, Sunday, May 10th, 1987. Hello and happy Mother's Day. I'm Chris Wallace. And joining me today, Fred Barnes of the New Republic and Gloria Borger of U.S. News and World Report. Congressman Gephardt here in Washington and Jesse Jackson in Greenville, South Carolina, thank you both for coming in today. Congressman, let me start with you if I can. Are we in a new world now in which a politician's personal life is fair game?
Well, I don't know. That really is the media's responsibility. I think the media can judge itself on how to cover candidates. The media is really a surrogate for the American people, and the questions to be asked and the kind of methods to be used to let people know what a candidacy is about is really the media's job, and I'm sure will be the subject of debate among people in the media in the days to come.
All right, what are you going to do if some reporter out in Iowa or New Hampshire starts asking you about your personal morality, starts staking you out? Are you going to tell him it's none of his business, or are you going to deal with that?
You're going to deal with it. When you run for public office in this country, and especially for the presidency, you climb into a goldfish bowl. That comes with the territory. You answer the questions that you're asked, and I think you try to tell people what you're about and what your candidacy about, what you believe in, what you want to have happen in this country.
Reverend Jackson, are you prepared to stand up to that kind of personal scrutiny? Reporters asking personal questions, staking out your house?
Well, I would hope they would not stake out my house as if I were a haunted person, but it is, as Congressman Gephardt has said, a fishbowl situation. But the press must make a judgment. I tend more to accept Abe Rosenthal's analysis of the press making a judgment call. It is important. The personal life is on the moral high ground. Of course, I will fight to the end to say that just as man-woman relationship is a moral issue, so is our illicit relationship with South Africa. And that's a moral issue too. All with the countries in Central America, and that's a moral issue. So moral tone has its place, but let us not limit moral tone just in that way.
Reverend Jackson, last week Gary Hart was asked directly whether he had committed adultery, and he refused to answer that question. Do you think Gary Hart was right in refusing to answer that question?
Well, I do think he was right in refusing to answer that question. It seems to me that was across the line. That at that level, this relationship between Gary Hart and his family, unless it was clear that some illicit relationship was having some bearing on national interests or national security, if that does not have some boundary, every time a man and a woman are in a room together, that is the low estimation of the woman's morality and suggested that it was a bed relationship rather than a brain relationship. Or if a man and a man go in the room, it is suggested that it could have been a homosexual conversation. There must be some limits, there must be some judgment established, and really the media must make that judgment.
Reverend Jackson, just specifically, what questions then of personal morality, if any, would you consider politically relevant?
Well, that's a judgment that the media actually does have to make. I would not try to make that judgment, and would try to operate at a level where the media will feel free to do what it must do to get out the story to the people. That's really your decision.
Congressman Gephardt, I think the core of the issue is this. Does sexual morality, does adultery have anything to do in telling whether someone would be a good president? What does adultery say about a candidate's worth as a candidate and as a potential president? Is that something we should ask about? I mean, does it tell something about the person?
Well, I think questions of morality and the way you conduct yourself are important. I think that people need to conduct themselves in a way that you can be a role model for the American people. People want to look up to leaders and want to believe in them. My son, Matt, is 16. Jane and I talk to him every day about how we'd like him to behave. I think it all goes in one ear and right out the other, but he watches everything we do. So, the way people conduct themselves is important.
So if a candidate is committing adultery, that should be one reason perhaps we should not vote against him. I mean, should vote against him.
Well, Fred, I'm not in a position to tell the media what questions to ask. That really is your responsibility. The fourth estate...
No. This is a question of what the voters should think. What should they conclude when they find out a candidate is womanizing or committing adultery?
Well, obviously, people are going to make different judgments.
But what would you have them conclude from that?
I don't think that's the way we want our leaders to act. I don't think that's a good role model for the country. And I think we have to have values that are expressed by our leaders. So I think, you know, that question is an important one, and one that people can certainly look at in making a judgment on whether or not they want this person to have this high responsibility.
Reverend Jackson, I see you straining in your seat. What do you want to say?
Well, my point is that if every time a woman is running for high office, if we ask the woman, are you a whore? Do you lust for men? Ask a man, are you a womanizer? Do you lust for women? Unless there's, I suppose, what Sam Donaldson calls probable cause, that seems to be a hairy question that does not speak to the broader issue. When I look at the historical development...
Let me interrupt just for a second, if I can, though, Reverend. You know, in his statement pulling out of the race last Friday, Gary Hart, in effect, seemed to blame his troubles on the press. Who do you think was responsible for Gary Hart's troubles, the press or Gary Hart himself?
Well, Gary Hart was responsible for his troubles to that extent. The media only amplifies. The media did not establish the pattern that became a matter of focus in his campaign. The point I was trying to make, that when we hear these rumors and historical documentation about Jefferson or Washington, Eisenhower or Kennedy, I just am glad that we did not lose their public service on that issue alone. It seems to me it's a judgment call. It must be put in a broader perspective on the whole question of moral tone, which I think is very important.
Reverend, let me ask you a question. Where does this, the Hart's pullout leave the race now? It appears, according to the polls, that you are the front runner. And as you well know, being the front runner has not always historically been an advantage. Do you embrace that standing as front runner, or do you run from it?
Well, I run toward the people. That is to say that I'm going to keep my eyes on the prize and not on the polls. I'm going to keep raising the question of direction. We've lost Gary Hart, unfortunately, but we've not lost his direction. He raised some very profound concerns about military reform and yet keeping a strong defense. He raised some very profound concerns about a new commitment to education in our country as a defense act and not just as a social program. So I would struggle to keep his direction alive.
Do you think that you are the natural heir to the Hart constituency, or is there one?
I don't think there is one. I think that the Hart supporters, staff-wise and contributors, will take a broader look, and some will go in many directions. In terms of progressive political direction, in contrast to the DNC kind of Democrat, conservative, Republican direction, there's more philosophical kinship between Hart's tradition and my tradition.
Congressman Gephardt, with all due respect, you're not a household name yet. And without Gary Hart to kill at the king, to strike it, without Gary Hart to strike at, how does any Democrat break out of the pack now?
I think this race is wide open. I think the front runner is probably undecided today, and I think that all of us face the same challenge. What I've tried to do for the last year and a half is to tell people why I want to be president, what I believe in and what I care about, what I think needs to happen in this country. I think each of us needs to make that case, and some of us will come out of the early events and will finally compete for the prize. But I think the issue here is, what do you want to do? Why do you want to be president? And what are your deep concerns about the future of the country?
Congressman Gephardt, one way you could break out of the pack is if you got the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. You're very popular with organized labor now, particularly because of your trade position. Don't you think you have a chance now to get the two-thirds needed among labor leaders and get that endorsement?
I have no idea. I've had my differences with labor in the past. Sometimes I've agreed with them, sometimes I haven't. I have always felt that the thing to do is the best public policy. If I can get the support of anyone, I will like that support, because it'll help me get nominated and win the presidency and do the things that I really care about.
Let me follow up on something Gloria said. Now, your campaign, the way it was emerging was you were going to play off Gary Hart, playing off him on the trade issue in particular. Don't you need a different strategy now that you don't have Gary Hart? A completely different one?
Fred, I've been asked for a year and a half, what does it mean if this candidate's in or that candidate's out? And my answer is, I don't worry about any of that. I am trying to run my campaign on the issues and the things that I care about. This country's in economic decline. And I think we've got to move it in some different directions. We got to worry about jobs and well-paying jobs, a rising standard of living in the country. That's what I care about. That's what I'm running my campaign on, and whoever else is in the race is not of importance to me.
Reverend Jackson, we hear some talk that none of you measure up and that we're going to see some new candidates getting into the race. Do you expect that, and does it scare you?
It does not scare me at all. I am convinced that the candidate that can be the most genuine, the most authentic, focus on moral high ground and economic common ground, is going to pull the most people together. The site of our fight now is going to be at some plant gate or some family farm auction or some missile site.
Reverend, we're just about to run out of time, and I want to give Congressman Gephardt a shot also. Are you scared about new candidates getting in the race?
As I said a minute ago, I haven't worried for a year and a half who's in the race or who's not in the race. I know I'm in the race, and I know what I want to say to the American people. I know why I want to be president, and I think I can win.
Congressman, Reverend Jackson, thank you both for coming in. And coming next, we'll get another look at this remarkable week in American politics from a Democratic insider when Meet the Press returns.
Meet the Press, the world's longest-running television program, is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, helping America use its abundance to meet the world's needs. And Raytheon Company, where quality starts with fundamentals.
At Raytheon Company, we believe that success comes from mastering the fundamentals. That's why we admire people like Larry Bird. People who are dedicated to perfecting the fundamentals, practicing them time and time again until they become flawless. So whether it's in electronics, aviation, appliances, or energy, Raytheon works hard on the fundamentals, because at Raytheon, we believe quality starts with fundamentals.
When cars burn gasoline, they emit poisonous carbon monoxide. The more cars, the more carbon monoxide. The more poison, the more pollution. But now you can fight it. Now you can change it. Because a change to a high-detergent ethanol-blended fuel can reduce carbon monoxide emissions by as much as a third. That's like having 1/3 fewer cars on the road. Up to 1/3 less carbon monoxide poisoning. Now isn't that a change for the better?
Right now, miles above the Earth on a manned space station, experiments are being conducted that could cure major diseases. New and valuable metal alloys are being created, and new scientific data that could literally change the course of history are being collected every minute. Shouldn't we be there too?
We're back now with former Democratic Chairman Robert Strauss. Mr. Strauss, thanks for coming in today.
Nice to be here. Congratulations on this first show.
Well, thank you. We have a Democratic race that appears to be wide open. Is it really, and
Yes.
do you expect a bunch of new candidates to get in the race?
It is wide open. I do not expect a bunch of new candidates to get in the race. I think it's likely that one or two may.
Such as?
Well, I think Sam Nunn made obvious that he's still looking at the race. He's going to keep it open for a while. I think Governor Celeste of Ohio, the governor of Arkansas is still keeping it open, so Bill Clinton. There are others who are looking at it.
Now, you've suggested, I think, that in fact a Democratic candidate could get in this race and in effect skip Iowa and New Hampshire. How's that possible?
Well, I think it's possible. I think there is really some resentment of the very strong role that Iowa and New Hampshire play in this process. And I think there's a good chance that that someone could get in later. It would have to run a national campaign, but you could start the South. You still run all over the country.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Hart's departure from the race. There's always been talk among a lot of party leaders that there wasn't really much enthusiasm for Gary Hart in the first place. He had a $1 million debt from 1984. He had difficulty retiring. Are party leaders actually relieved to a certain extent that Gary Hart no longer can be the nominee?
No, I don't think so at all. I think Gary Hart was saying some important things that need to be said. He didn't generate a great deal of warmth. I think his support was broad. I don't think he was thick. I think a lot of his popularity was name identification, and that's what stood him in the polls well. And they're going to miss him because he was saying intelligent things, asking good questions.
But do you think he ever would have been the nominee anyway?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not going to hang that on him now. Certainly, I have serious doubts that he would have been, or any of the others.
Some reporters and some Democratic leaders have described Hart as a time bomb ticking away, that if he hadn't gotten in trouble last weekend, it would have happened somewhere along the campaign trail. Do you believe that?
Oh, I don't know about that. You know, Gary Hart's out of this thing now. I think this is a generational change for Democrats. I think we've got a strong field of new people. Bright, able, new people who are talking about the problems this nation faces for the future. And I think the one of those that can articulate where our party ought to be and can stake out a vision of where this country ought to be going and talk sensibly, that'll be the next president of the United States.
I'm going to ask you one more question about Gary Hart and yourself anyway, and that is, you were going to, had a plan to help Gary Hart pay off his debt.
That's incorrect.
In 1984. You and John White didn't? You weren't going to help him raise some money?
No, we
for
had
that?
discussed it casually.
Okay, you had discussed it.
We had no such plan.
Well, that's not my question anyway. My question is this. You had heard rumors about Gary Hart and womanizing. Perhaps you'd heard evidence of Gary Hart and womanizing. I'd certainly heard them. People all over Washington and the Democratic Party reporters had heard them. Why didn't you go to Gary Hart as a Democratic leader and say, look, you may get the nomination, you may get this party in trouble, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Stop this or get out of the race.
You know, I learned a long time ago, Fred, I'm not God. It's sort of traumatic when you come to that, when you realize that.
But you are a Democratic leader.
But it's good for you in the long run, and I don't try to set the social or political mores or the political actions of people. Haven't in the past, serve you in good stead. I think it'll serve me in good stead in the future.
You've been in politics a long time.
Yes, sir.
How much do voters care about personal morality?
I think they care. I don't think they're blue-nosed, but I think they care. And I think there's certain things, certain standards that they want their candidates, the people in public office, to meet. And I think, generally speaking, they do. I really think politicians generally get a bum rap. Most of them really meet high standards of morality. They do live in a fishbowl, and they measure up exceedingly well. And we lose sight of that sometimes.
I want to go back to Gary Hart just for a second also. What do you think of his withdrawal statement, which he seemed to blame all his problems?
I didn't care for his withdrawal statement. I was disappointed in it.
Do you blame Gary Hart then for his own problems, or do you blame the press?
Well, they were Hart created. He knows that, and everyone knows that. And I think the press could have handled it a bit better in response. You know, there's such a thing as carrying it to absurdity. I'd hate to see the time when we end up nominating the fellow or the woman who has the thickest hide. That's a bum way to choose a candidate too.
Mr. Strauss, I don't understand why Democrats are so reluctant to say that Jesse Jackson is the front runner now.
I mean, he's reluctant. I think Jesse Jackson, I think a lot of these people, you had two of them on here this morning, I think we have a distinguished group of people running.
I know, but Jackson's way ahead in the polls,
and I think Jackson is well ahead in the poll. He's been around the track before. If you listen to what he's saying sensible things. He's talking about economic issues that are on people's minds. He's doing it in Iowa, and he's doing it in Florida.
But isn't he also saying more government, higher taxes?
No, I haven't heard that. He's saying a lot of sensible things. He's saying some things I don't agree with. I think are sensible, don't agree with.
If you had to predict now, do you think one of the 7 candidates running would be the nominee?
Oh, yes. I will go further and predict one of the 7 candidates now, or one that gets in if we get another in too. I don't know who's going to make up the field, but I will predict this, that out of this group will come a new leadership for the next 15 years in this country, and it'll be a Democrat who'll be the next president of this country.
Mr. Strauss, thank you. Thanks
for
coming in. And when we return our little group here, we'll discuss what the Hart affair means for us. What should political reporters be reporting on?
Now, yesterday we were talking about food. Today we're going to talk about where it comes from. Does anybody know? Jill?
It comes from the grocery store.
Well, yes, but before that, anybody else? Andy?
Food comes from the farmers who grow it, and all the other people who help turn it into the food that we eat every day.
Okay.
That's not all. You know,
agriculture is something we can all be proud of. It's America's biggest industry, with assets equal to 50% of those of all the manufacturing corporations in the country. It's also our largest employer. 1 of every 5 workers, over 23 million people, help put food on our tables. And American agriculture is the most productive system of its kind in the world. Not only do we spend less for food than any other country on earth, we also produce enough surplus each year to export more than $20 billion worth of food and feed ingredients.
That's very good. How do you know so much about food?
well, my dad's a great teacher. Hey, Tammy! Hey, Dad!
Food is so abundant and so affordable in this country that we often take it for granted. Fortunately, a lot of other people don't.
Back now on Meet the Press, the subject is the press and our role in covering politics. And joining us, A.M. Rosenthal, who wrote a column in the New York Times a few days ago, which called that stakeout outside Gary Hart's home last weekend repugnant. Abe, thanks for coming in. Let's go back a few months to that when you were an editor of the New York Times. One of your reporters gets a tip that Gary Hart is going to spend a weekend with a model and he wants to stake out Hart's home. Do you let him?
No. I think that the issue is not what you cover now, but how you cover it. I think that a presidential candidate's personal life is very often germane to a campaign. But what we're talking about now is not the candidate, it's ourselves. I think Mr. Jackson and Mr. Gephardt put their finger right on it when they said the issue is how we cover the campaign. And that only we can determine. They can't determine a thing about it. And while I think that the Miami Herald was correct in feeling that the issue of his morality or sexual morality might be germane, the way they went after the story, I do think was repugnant. I would never have lurked around in bushes when I was a reporter. I was a reporter for 20 years.
Well, I don't understand that.
As an editor for 23 years, I never would have asked a reporter to do what I wouldn't do.
Abe, I think you're going to have to stick that thing back in your ear so we can talk. But the question really is, what's wrong with a stakeout? If that's the way to find out whether or not they're together in the room, why not do it?
Because I think it creates creates disrespect for the reporter within himself or herself. There are many ways of getting a story. If you cannot get the story in a way that sits well with your own stomach, then you don't get it, or you wait a day or two and you get it another way.
Fred Barnes, you're the reporter in this case.
Well, it would,
make your case.
Oh, I'd certainly do it. Would sit well in my stomach. I don't think the Miami Herald had anything else they could do but go and stake out the house. They were not lurking in the bushes, after all. They were standing out in a public street observing Senator Hart's house.
They were in
and there was another issue involved besides just sexual morality. Senator Hart was going around the country saying, I am not a womanizer. He denied it many times. He did to the New York Times. He did to me. He did in public. He presented his wife as someone extremely important to his campaign. And the Miami Herald had a tip that this whole facade he was presenting was untrue, that he was lying.
Gloria Borger,
checked it out.
break the tie for us.
Well, I'm with Fred on this one. I think that perhaps the Miami Herald did not execute this story correctly. They didn't do a good job. They're not detectives.
They did a terrible job.
They did it, but it was the right story. In the end.
That is not the issue. I'm sorry.
And
the question is not whether it was the right
Hart.
story, but whether it was the right method. This is ends and means. If we are to say, as newspaper people, that we have the right to do virtually anything to get a story, then the problem will be with ourselves and our own self-respect. I have been picketed many, many times and had no problem about it. But when I was followed by hidden reporters or whatever, my reaction to them was not fear, it was contempt.
But
and
Gary
I think that
Hart...
that kind of thing makes the public and ourselves contemptuous of ourselves.
But Gary Hart
what happens
invited
next?
this.
Excuse me, Abe, what happens next? Do we hold all these other guys up to the same standard and check out personal rumors about their lives? Or was Gary Hart a special case?
No, I don't think the issue is Gary Hart. I repeat, I think that Gary Hart didn't do himself any honor when he blamed the press. His own problems were created by him. I am talking about ourselves. And I believe that we have a right to go inquire into the life or lives of the candidates. I do not believe we have any right to conduct ourselves in a way that is contrary to normal human decency and human conduct.
But when a candidate himself invites this kind of personal scrutiny, as he did to many reporters, is it not then the reporter's responsibility to follow it?
If somebody invites you to be a sneak thief, you don't have to be a sneak thief. Gary Hart can invite us to do anything. The question then is, what do we do? What's in our stomachs? Gary Hart can invite us to follow him around the streets.
He did.
Or sneak around his bushes. That's fine. That doesn't mean we have to accept the invitation. That's Gary Hart's problem.
How would you get Abe, how would you get the story otherwise? How do you find out whether or not he spent the weekend with Donna Rice if you don't stake out his house?
There are various ways of doing it. For one thing, you take a little more time to find out who the woman is, speak to her about it. Maybe she would have talked. You don't have to get the story in the next edition the way the Miami Herald did. The whole problem with the Miami Herald's coverage of it was that they wanted to get it to the next edition. Now, if they'd waited an edition, waited a day, you know what would have happened? They might have gotten beaten. And if that would have happened, that would be too bad, but in a sense would have not been a disgrace to the Miami Herald, but an honor.
there would have been something else that could very easily have happened there, I believe, and that is a cover-up by the Hart campaign. Remember, the Hart campaign came out denying this with various stories. They could have gotten their stories together, and they might have done a successful cover-up. But let me disagree on another thing. The issue was Gary Hart. It wasn't all the candidates in the campaign, but Gary Hart. He's the one where there was a context,
next week there'll be another
years
one
of
then.
rumors, and a specific tip, so reporters check that out. You don't have anything like that regarding any of the other candidates.
How do you know?
But let me ask you, well,
Because I cover the campaign, that's how I know.
Do you think it should turn up tomorrow? Do you think that it should turn up tomorrow, that we should now continue out of some sort of fairness doctrine to continue investigating the other candidates?
You say that rather contemptuously, don't you?
What?
Fairness doctrine.
Well,
I'm not talking about the fairness doctrine. I'm talking about ourselves. If you feel comfortable sneaking around in bushes or unmarked cars, please, you go right ahead. I don't. And I think there are a great many newspaper people in this country who do not feel comfortable about it, and many of them have called me and written to me about it.
What do you
so
think, Gabe,
I'm not telling you what to do, Gloria. You do whatever you want to do. That's what the press is all about. I'm saying that I, as a newspaper man, would not sneak around outside somebody's house all night long, waiting to hear whether he was see or hear whether he was in bed with somebody.
But you
it's
do
up to
say
you want to do it, go ahead.
No, but you do say
no law
that
against it.
But you do say that the story was relevant, and that.
Of course, it was relevant. I have not. But the relevancy does not excuse the way you get a story. There is something called ends and means, and if you do it on this story, you can do it on every story.
Abe, we've got an end, and it's the end of the show. Thanks very much.
Sorry.
Whatever else can be said of Gary Hart, he has obviously left this campaign trail a very different place for both politicians and the press. Abe Rosenthal in New York, Fred Barnes and Gloria Borger here in Washington, thank you all for coming in today. Which brings us to our quotation of the week, which comes from newspaper columnist Ellen Goodman, who said, "The press is not guilty of the character assassination of Gary Hart. Call this one character suicide." And that's Meet the Press for this week. To all those moms out there, including mine, happy Mother's Day.
McDonnell Douglas builds the F-15 Eagle, fighter and attack plane in one. From aircraft to trucks to medical equipment, our lease financing conserves capital. Airlines watching their bottom lines are choosing our new long-range MD-11. We're giving America its money's worth in aviation, space, and information systems. We're McDonnell Douglas.
The fundamentals. The harder you work on them, the better you get. That's why at Raytheon Company, we admire people like Wade Boggs. People who are dedicated to perfecting the fundamentals, practicing them over and over and over until they're flawless. At Raytheon, we do the same thing. Because in electronics, aviation, appliances, and energy, we believe quality starts with fundamentals.
Meet the Press has been sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, helping America use its abundance to meet the world's needs. For a printed transcript of Meet the Press, send $1 and a stamped self-addressed envelope to Kelly Press, Box 55358, Washington, D.C. 20011.
I'm Bryant Gumbel. This week on Today, Hill Street's final roll call.
I'm Jane Pauley. Also Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman, plus Gregory Peck and Lindsay Wagner.
This week on Today.
Every city has a story all its own. NBC Nightly News travels down the East Coast to bring them home to you. Join Tom Brokaw for a 5-city tour starting tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.